Harrison Shaw had always trusted his instincts, but that evening they failed him spectacularly. Standing in the dim hallway outside his daughter Lily's room, he held a crystal tumbler of bourbon in one hand, a quiet reward for closing the $200 million Riverside development deal. The amber liquid caught the faint glow of the light above, a symbol of his accomplishments. He'd been planning to share the good news with Lily, his 17-year-old daughter. But as he approached her room, her voice stopped him cold. "Dad's so stupid," Lily said, her tone tinged with amusement. "He actually thinks Mom's upset about all his business trips. Like, hello, Ryan practically lives here when Dad's gone." The word struck him like a blow. Harrison's grip tightened on the glass as the ice cubes clinked softly. His world suddenly felt unsteady, fragile. Lily giggled, her voice carrying the weight of a secret she shouldn't have been keeping. "Mom says once Dad's inheritance clears, we're moving to Chicago. New life, new start." Harrison's stomach churned, the bourbon suddenly bitter on his tongue. His wife Rebecca, the woman he trusted for 12 years, wasn't just unfaithful, she was orchestrating something far darker. Rebecca had been his rock after the death of his first wife, Sarah. She'd been there to help him raise Lily, offering stability when he needed it most. But now, as he pieced together Lily's words, that trust began to unravel. "Ryan says the timing has to be perfect," Lily continued, her voice lowering conspiratorially. "Once they control Shaw Developments, the board won't have a choice about approving the marina project. Not that it matters, the environmental impact study was totally faked anyway." Harrison felt the weight of the betrayal settle heavily on his chest. Ryan Blackwood. Not just any Ryan, the EPA oversight director who had fast-tracked approvals for the marina project, bending every rule in his favor. And now, he realized, Rebecca had played a role in ensuring every advantage. Harrison retreated from Lily's door, moving silently back to his study. He set the bourbon on his desk, untouched, and pulled out his phone. Not to confront, not yet. First, he needed the full picture. 3 calls later, his private investigator, Jack Monroe, was on his way. Harrison's instructions were clear. "I need everything. Every meeting, every document, every call that's crossed my father's desk in the last year. And Rebecca's activities too." Jack's voice was steady. "This is going to get expensive." Harrison's reply was cold. "Money's not an issue. What matters is discretion. No one can know, especially not my daughter." He ended the call and poured another glass of bourbon. This time, he drank it in one sharp swallow, the burn doing little to dull the fury building inside him. Rebecca hadn't just betrayed their marriage, she'd corrupted their daughter, threatened his company, and tainted everything he'd built. But she'd made a crucial mistake. She thought she was dealing with a broken man, too preoccupied with his work to notice the cracks forming in his home. The next morning, Harrison's routine continued as if nothing had changed. He ate breakfast with Rebecca and Lily, sipped his coffee as Rebecca rambled about redecorating the sunroom, and kissed her cheek on his way out. "Don't forget to pick up that wine for dinner tonight," Rebecca said sweetly as he grabbed his briefcase. Harrison smiled, the perfect image of a devoted husband. "Of course. See you later." But he wasn't heading to the office. Instead, he drove to a private suite at the Carlton Hotel, where Jack Monroe was waiting with the first pieces of the puzzle. Jack's face was grim as he spread surveillance photos and documents across the polished mahogany table. "Every business trip you've taken in the past 18 months, Jack began, pointing to the photos, coincided with EPA inspections at your project sites. Harrison's jaw tightened as he examined the images. Rebecca and Ryan Blackwood entering hotels, restaurants, and, most damning of all, his own home. Each timestamp told a story he hadn't been privy to. "These meetings," Harrison said, tapping one of the photos, "they're all tied to board votes or regulatory deadlines." Jack nodded. "Your wife didn't stumble into this affair. She chose Ryan deliberately. And he's not her only connection. Rebecca's been meeting with EPA officials and even competitors who mysteriously withdrew their bids on key properties. Jack slid another photo forward. Rebecca, smiling over lunch with a man Harrison recognized as a former bidder on the marina project. The marina isn't their first target. They've done this before. Different companies, different cities. Ryan handles the regulatory angle, and Rebecca provides, let's call it vulnerability. Harrison clenched his fists, the photos blurring before him as Jack continued. Your father's health has been another angle. Rebecca's been visiting him regularly. The nurse said she brings papers disguised as medical forms. Your father's signature is on several transfer authorizations. Jack hesitated before delivering the final blow. The transfers set up shell corporations. On paper, you'll inherit controlling interest in Shaw Developments. But in reality, Rebecca and Ryan will control the assets through offshore entities. Harrison stood abruptly, pacing to the window. And Lily? Jack's voice was careful. She's been their eyes and ears. Every time you've worked from home, every private call, every board meeting she's overheard, she's been reporting back to Rebecca. Her trust fund isn't just generous, Harrison. It's managed by one of Ryan's shell companies. Harrison turned slowly, his eyes hard as steel. They've turned my daughter into a spy. There's one more thing, Jack said, pulling out another file. Your first wife's accident, Sarah. There are irregularities in the original investigation. Harrison's breath caught. Sarah's death wasn't random? Jack shook his head. I need more time to confirm, but it's possible her accident was orchestrated. Rebecca and Ryan's organization has a history of targeting executives through personal tragedy. Before Harrison could respond, Jack's phone buzzed. He checked it, frowning. Rebecca just accessed your father's medical records. She's moving faster than we expected. Harrison's voice was quiet but resolute. She's moving exactly as I need her to. That evening, Harrison met with his father's lawyer, Gerald Brandenburg, in a quiet office. Together, they reviewed the evidence Jack had gathered. This is systematic corporate theft, Gerald said, his voice heavy. Your father's been signing away key subsidiaries, likely without realizing it. But some of it can be reversed. Harrison placed a sealed envelope on the desk. The real environmental impact study. My father had it conducted privately. It's devastating, Gerald. If it goes public, the company will survive, but barely. And Rebecca and Ryan? They'll face criminal charges. Gerald raised an eyebrow. What are you planning? Harrison's smile was cold. Justice. He handed Gerald a list. Draft new papers, legitimate ones. Everything Rebecca and Ryan have signed, I want mirrored versions that restore full control to me. I'm going to let them think they've won. Then, I'll show them what a real corporate takeover looks like. Harrison left the law office that evening with a clear plan. The evidence was in place, the papers were being drafted, and the trap was nearly ready to spring. But to pull it off, he had to maintain the facade. Rebecca couldn't suspect a thing. When he returned home, the house was bathed in the warm glow of evening light. Rebecca greeted him with a glass of wine, her smile as charming as ever. How was work? She asked, settling into the couch. Busy as always, Harrison replied, mirroring her casual tone. He handed her a small bouquet of flowers. I thought these might brighten the sunroom. Rebecca's face lit up, and for a fleeting moment, Harrison wondered how much of her affection had ever been real. That night, they sat down to dinner as a family. Lily talked about her upcoming school project, Rebecca chimed in with plans for the weekend, and Harrison played the role of the attentive husband and father. But his mind was elsewhere. Every detail of the conversation felt calculated. Rebecca's subtle questions about his day, her comments on his father's health, even Lily's idle chatter, it all had the undertones of surveillance. You've been working so hard lately, Rebecca said, reaching for his hand. Maybe it's time to take a break. You deserve it. Harrison smiled faintly. Soon. I want to get a few more things in order first. As he said it, he felt a grim satisfaction. The pieces of his trap were falling into place, and Rebecca was walking straight into it. The next day, Harrison met Jack again, this time in a private conference room. The investigator spread out more photos and documents, his expression grim. "These are records of Rebecca's meetings over the past 2 years," Jack said, pointing to the timeline. "She wasn't just targeting you. She's been working with Ryan to manipulate other executives too." Harrison studied the photos, Rebecca laughing with rival developers, Ryan shaking hands with city officials. "They've been laying the groundwork for this for years," he muttered. Jack nodded. "Your father was just one piece of the puzzle. They've used his illness to push through paperwork that benefits them. But it's not just business. They've compromised regulators, falsified studies, and even bribed board members." Harrison's jaw tightened. "And Lily?" Jack hesitated. "She doesn't seem to understand the full scope of what's happening. To her, it's just helping Mom with Dad's business. But every piece of information she's given Rebecca has been weaponized against you." That evening, Harrison returned home early, catching Rebecca off guard as she finished a phone call. She quickly ended the call and smiled. "You're home early. I thought we could spend some time together," Harrison said, his tone light. "It feels like we've both been so busy lately." Rebecca hesitated, then nodded. "That sounds nice." Over dinner, Harrison carefully steered the conversation toward the future. "I've been thinking," he said, sipping his wine. "Maybe we should consider scaling back some of the expansion plans. Focus on the core projects for now." Rebecca's eyes flickered with something, hesitation, perhaps. "That's an interesting idea," she said, her tone measured. "But isn't this the time to capitalize on opportunities?" Harrison smiled. "Maybe. Or maybe it's time to solidify what we already have." Late that night, after Rebecca and Lily had gone to bed, Harrison sat in his study, reviewing the final documents Gerald had sent over. Every signature, every transfer, every shell company had been unraveled and mirrored. The parallel papers were ready to be filed, undoing Rebecca and Ryan's carefully constructed scheme in one fell swoop. All that was left was the timing. Harrison's phone buzzed with a text from Jack, "Everything's in place. Rebecca has a meeting with Ryan tomorrow. Should I record?" Harrison's reply was brief, "Yes. It's time to tighten the noose." As he closed his laptop and poured himself a final glass of bourbon, Harrison felt a sense of clarity. The game was almost over, and Rebecca had no idea she was about to lose. The next morning, Harrison sat in his office, outwardly focused on his work but keeping a close eye on updates from Jack. Rebecca had left earlier than usual, claiming she had errands to run, but Harrison knew better. At exactly 10:15 a.m., Jack sent a message, "Rebecca and Ryan just arrived at the Midtown Bistro. Audio recording is live." Harrison leaned back in his chair, heart pounding as Jack sent snippets of the conversation in real time. "Rebecca, everything's on track." Harrison hasn't suspected a thing. He's still too focused on his work to notice. "Ryan, good. The next step is critical. Has he mentioned his father's estate recently?" "Rebecca, he's been quiet about it, but I've seen the files on his desk. He's reviewing them. I'll make sure the papers we need are signed when the time comes." "Ryan, we can't afford mistakes, Rebecca. Once the assets transfer, we'll have control of Shaw Developments and the Marina project. After that, we're out. No loose ends." Harrison read the updates with a cold detachment. Every word confirmed his suspicions, but it also gave him the clarity he needed to execute his plan. That afternoon, Harrison called an emergency board meeting. The room filled quickly with his father's longtime allies and newer members, many of whom Rebecca and Ryan had influenced. As the board settled in, Harrison remained calm, projecting confidence. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," he began. "I've recently uncovered significant concerns about the company's direction and operations. Before we proceed, I'd like to share a few findings. The room buzzed with murmurs as Harrison played the audio recording Jack had captured earlier that morning. Rebecca, Harrison hasn't suspected a thing. Ryan, once the assets transfer, we'll have control of Shaw Developments and the Marina project. Gasps erupted around the room, followed by uneasy silence. Harrison let the words hang in the air before speaking again. "These are the people you've trusted to guide our company," he said, his voice steady but firm. "My wife, Rebecca, and her accomplice, Ryan Blackwood, have been orchestrating a takeover from the inside. They've falsified studies, bribed officials, and manipulated board members to achieve their goals." One of the senior board members, Eleanor Hayes, raised a hand. "Harrison, this is shocking. What steps are you taking to address this?" Harrison nodded. "Effective immediately, I'm terminating Rebecca Shaw and Ryan Blackwood's access to all company resources. Additionally, I've filed a motion to reverse the fraudulent transfers they orchestrated." He slid copies of the documents Gerald had prepared across the table. "These are the legitimate contracts, ensuring all assets remain under the rightful control of Shaw Developments." By the time Harrison returned home, Rebecca was already there, sitting in the living room with an uncharacteristically tense expression. She held her phone tightly, scrolling through emails with increasing panic. "Harrison," she said sharply as he entered. "What's going on? Why can't I access the company accounts? And why are lawyers calling me about revoked contracts?" Harrison placed his briefcase on the table and sat across from her, his expression unreadable. "It's over, Rebecca." Her face twisted in confusion. "What are you talking about?" "I know everything," Harrison said calmly. "The meetings with Ryan, the fraudulent transfers, the fake environmental reports. I know about your plan to take control of my father's company, and my inheritance." Rebecca's composure cracked. "Harrison, I can explain." "Don't," he interrupted, his voice cold. "I have recordings, documents, and witnesses. Your schemes are done. You've betrayed me, our marriage, and my daughter. There's no coming back from this." Rebecca's panic turned to desperation. "We can fix this," she pleaded. "Ryan manipulated me. I only wanted to help us. Think about Lily, think about our family." Harrison's eyes hardened. "You didn't think about Lily when you used her as a pawn. And you didn't think about me when you lied and schemed behind my back. You made your choice, Rebecca. Now you'll face the consequences." Rebecca's voice faltered, but she managed to whisper, "What are you going to do?" Harrison stood, towering over her. "I'm going to protect what's mine. You'll hear from my lawyer soon." As he walked away, he felt a strange mix of anger, relief, and sadness. Rebecca had betrayed him, but now he was in control. The pieces of his life might be fractured, but they were still his to rebuild. The fallout from the day's events loomed over the house like a storm. Harrison sat in his study, staring at the glass of bourbon he hadn't touched. The betrayal from Rebecca was devastating, but knowing his daughter, Lily, had unwittingly played a role in it was almost unbearable. He heard her footsteps in the hallway, moving toward her room. Taking a deep breath, he stood and knocked softly on her door. "Come in," Lily called, her voice light and unsuspecting. Harrison stepped inside, finding her sitting cross-legged on her bed, scrolling through her phone. She glanced up, her face breaking into a smile. "Hey, Dad. What's up?" He studied her for a moment, trying to reconcile the girl he loved with the role she had played in Rebecca's schemes. "We need to talk," he said, closing the door behind him. Lily's smile faded. "What's wrong?" Harrison sat on the edge of her bed, choosing his words carefully. "Lily, I overheard you talking to someone about your mom and Ryan. About some plans they had." Her face froze, a flicker of guilt crossing her eyes. "What? I don't know what you're talking about." "Lily," he said gently but firmly, "I know you've been helping your mom. Sharing things you've heard about my work, the company, the board. I need you to tell me the truth." She shifted uncomfortably, her phone forgotten in her lap. "Mom said it was just little stuff," she muttered. Nothing serious. She said I was helping you, too. Harrison's chest tightened. Helping me? Lily, the things you've told your mom have been used to hurt our family, to hurt me. Did you know what she and Ryan were planning? Tears welled up in her eyes, and she shook her head. No. I swear, Dad, I didn't know. Mom just said you were so busy, and she needed to take care of some things for you. She made it sound like it was for the company. Harrison exhaled, his anger softening as he saw the confusion and hurt in her face. I believe you, Lily. But you need to understand, what your mom and Ryan were doing wasn't for the company. It was for themselves. And they were willing to use you to get what they wanted. Lily wiped her eyes, her voice trembling. I didn't mean to hurt you, Dad. I didn't know what was really going on. I know you didn't, Harrison said, pulling her into a hug. This isn't your fault. But from now on, we have to be honest with each other. No more secrets, okay? She nodded against his shoulder. Okay. And Lily, he added, pulling back to look her in the eyes, I need you to understand something important. This house, this family, it's ours. Not your mom's to manipulate, not Ryan's to steal. Ours. And I'm going to do everything I can to protect it. For the first time in days, he saw a spark of trust return to her eyes. I believe you, Dad, she said softly. The next day, Harrison received an urgent call from his lawyer, Gerald. Rebecca's lawyers just reached out. She's trying to negotiate a settlement before this goes public. Harrison smirked, pacing his office. Of course she is. What's her offer? They want to keep things quiet. Rebecca's willing to give up her claims to the company in exchange for a reduced share of the divorce settlement. Harrison's tone turned icy. She doesn't have claims to the company. She never did. And there's no deal that keeps this quiet. Every fraudulent document, every manipulated study, it's all going public. Are you sure? Gerald asked. This could get messy. I'm sure, Harrison said firmly. Rebecca and Ryan have made careers out of exploiting others. It ends now. Later that afternoon, Harrison held a press conference. Flanked by Gerald and Jack, he addressed the shareholders and the media. Over the past year, individuals within Shaw Developments have attempted to undermine this company's integrity. These actions include fraudulent environmental studies, bribery of regulatory officials, and the manipulation of company assets. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. The perpetrators have been identified, and steps are being taken to ensure they are held accountable. Shaw Developments has and always will operate with transparency and integrity. The fallout was swift. Ryan Blackwood was arrested within days, and Rebecca's name was splashed across every business news outlet. The dust from the scandal settled slowly, leaving a trail of legal battles and severed relationships in its wake. Rebecca's betrayal became a cautionary tale in the corporate world, and Ryan Blackwood faced a litany of charges ranging from fraud to bribery. For Harrison, the weeks following the press conference were a whirlwind of damage control. He spent hours working with his legal team, reassuring board members, and reinforcing Shaw Development's reputation. But amid the chaos, his focus remained on Lily and repairing what Rebecca had nearly destroyed. At first, Lily withdrew, avoiding conversations and retreating to her room whenever Harrison tried to engage her. He didn't push, instead choosing small moments to remind her that he was there for her. One evening, as he was cleaning up dinner, she finally broke her silence. Dad, she began hesitantly, standing in the doorway, can I talk to you? Harrison set the dish towel aside, giving her his full attention. Of course. What's on your mind? She hesitated, fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. I feel so stupid. I trusted Mom, and I didn't see what she was doing. How could I not see it? Harrison crossed the room and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Lily, this isn't your fault. Your mom took advantage of your trust, and that says more about her than it does about you. You were put in an impossible position. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she nodded. I just feel like I let you down. Harrison shook his head, pulling her into a hug. You didn't let me down. If anything, this has shown me how strong you are. We're going to be okay, Lily. Together. Meanwhile, Rebecca faced the full weight of the consequences. The public exposure of her schemes left her socially and professionally ostracized. Her divorce settlement was modest at best, with Harrison ensuring that most of the marital assets were directed toward Lily's future. She reached out to Harrison several times, pleading for a second chance or a private resolution to salvage her reputation. Each time, Harrison's response was the same. No deals, Rebecca. You made your choices. Now you'll live with them. Her calls grew less frequent, and eventually, they stopped altogether. Months later, life began to regain a sense of normalcy. Shaw Developments emerged stronger, its renewed commitment to ethical practices earning praise from shareholders and clients alike. Harrison even began to entertain the idea of expanding the company further, this time with Lily's input. One afternoon, as they sat together reviewing potential scholarships for her college applications, Lily turned to him with a small smile. Do you think Mom will ever change? She asked. Harrison considered her question carefully. I don't know, he admitted. But what I do know is that we don't need to wait for her to change to move forward. We've got each other, and that's enough. She nodded, her smile growing. Yeah. It is. That evening, as Harrison sat alone in his study, he poured himself a small glass of bourbon. The house was peaceful, filled only with the soft hum of life going on. He raised a glass to the framed photo on his desk, a picture of him and Lily at her last birthday. To us, he murmured, taking a sip. For the first time in months, he felt a sense of peace. Rebecca's betrayal had shaken his world, but it hadn't destroyed it. Piece by piece, he and Lily were building something stronger, a future rooted in trust, love, and the lessons they'd learned together.